Peter Ravensdale, Duke of Blackthorn, returned from the continent with medals pinned to his chest and ice in his veins, a man who had seen too much war to ever smile easily again. London whispered that he was impossible to tame, that no woman could reach past the armor he wore even in ballrooms. But on a winter evening in Mayfair, his gaze found Charlotte Wycliffe across a crowded room, and something shifted. She was promised to another man, bound by duty and her father's word. What happened next would shake the foundations of proper society and prove that some hearts refuse to be caged no matter the cost. The chandeliers in Lady Redmond's ballroom cast golden light across the faces of London's finest, but Charlotte Wycliffe barely noticed the glitter. She stood on the landing of the grand staircase, her gloved hand resting on the banister, watching the sea of silk and wool below with the practiced smile of a woman who had long ago learned to hide what she truly felt. 23 years of being the Earl of Wycliffe's daughter had taught her many things: how to pour tea without trembling, how to discuss the weather as though it mattered, how to accept compliments about her chestnut hair and hazel eyes without revealing that she sometimes wondered if anyone saw past them to the person underneath, and how to accept, without question, that she would marry Lord Andrew Harbury in the spring. The arrangement had been made when she was 17, a sensible match between families of equal standing. Andrew was kind enough, handsome in a conventional way, and utterly predictable. He spoke of estate management and parliamentary votes with the same measured tone he used for everything else. Charlotte had convinced herself that contentment was a reasonable substitute for passion. Tonight, however, something felt different. The murmur of conversation shifted, heads turning toward the entrance. Charlotte followed the collective gaze and felt her breath catch. Peter Ravensdale, Duke of Blackthorn, stood in the doorway. She had heard of him, of course. Everyone had. The Duke of War, they called him, decorated for his service in the Peninsular campaigns, renowned for his tactical brilliance and his absolute refusal to discuss what he had seen. At 31, he had returned to England 6 months ago with a reputation that preceded him like thunder before a storm. Cold, unyielding, impossible to reach. But Charlotte had not been prepared for the reality of him. He was tall, his dark hair slightly longer than fashion dictated, as though he could not be bothered with such trivial concerns. His evening clothes fit him perfectly, yet somehow he wore them like a man who would prefer to be anywhere else. A thin scar traced along his left temple, disappearing into his hairline. His eyes, dark and unreadable, swept the room with the alertness of a man who had learned never to let his guard down. And then those eyes found hers. Charlotte froze. The distance between them was considerable, half a staircase and a crowded ballroom, yet she felt the impact of his gaze as surely as if he had reached out and touched her. Something in his expression shifted, a flicker of recognition that made no sense because they had never met. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. She should look away. Propriety demanded it. A lady did not stare at a gentleman, particularly one with such a dangerous reputation, but she could not move. Peter Ravensdale inclined his head, a slight acknowledgement that somehow felt more intimate than any elaborate bow. Then, without smiling, he turned toward his hostess, and the moment broke. Charlotte released a breath she had not realized she was holding. Her heart hammered against her ribs in a way that had nothing to do with the stuffy warmth of the ballroom. She pressed her palm against her stomach, willing herself to composure. Foolish. She was being utterly foolish. Miss Beatrice Lennox appeared at her elbow, blue eyes bright with curiosity. Beatrice had been Charlotte's friend since childhood, the only person who sometimes saw past the perfect exterior. "Did you see him?" Beatrice whispered, her voice barely audible above the music. "The Duke of Blackthorn. They say he killed 12 men in hand-to-hand combat." 12. Charlotte found her voice, though it came out softer than intended. "They say many things. They also say he refuses every invitation and accepts no company." Beatrice leaned closer, her expression conspiratorial. "Yet tonight he is here. Lady Redmond must have used considerable influence. Or perhaps he simply chose to attend," Charlotte said, surprised by the defensive note in her own words. Beatrice gave her a curious look but said nothing more. The dinner bell chimed, and the guests began moving toward the dining room in their predetermined order. Charlotte descended the stairs with practiced grace, her skirts whispering against the marble steps. She found her place at the long table, Lord Andrew already seated to her right. He smiled at her with the comfortable affection of a man who believed everything was settled. "You look lovely tonight, my dear," he said, patting her hand. "Mother was just saying how fortunate we are that the weather has held for the winter season. The roads remain passable." Charlotte murmured something appropriate, but her attention had fractured. 3 seats down and across from her, Peter Ravensdale was being introduced to the Countess of Wilmington. He responded with perfect courtesy, but Charlotte noticed how his shoulders remained tense, how his gaze occasionally drifted to the windows, as though calculating the distance to escape. The first course arrived, and conversation flowed around her in familiar patterns. Andrew discussed crop rotations with the gentleman to his left. Beatrice, seated nearby, attempted to draw out a shy young baronet who blushed at every comment. Charlotte found herself watching the Duke of Blackthorn. He ate little, responded when spoken to but initiated nothing, and maintained an invisible barrier around himself that no one seemed able to penetrate. She should not care. She should focus on Andrew, on her duties, on the life that awaited her. But when Peter Ravensdale's gaze met hers again across the table, that same jolt of recognition went through her, and she wondered what it would be like to know what thoughts moved behind those guarded eyes. The moment stretched, suspended in the clink of silverware and the murmur of polite conversation. Then Charlotte did something she had never done before. She broke protocol. "Tell me, Your Grace," she heard herself say, her voice carrying across the table with more confidence than she felt. "Everyone speaks of your service in the peninsula, but no one seems to ask what you wish to speak of instead. What occupies your thoughts now that you have returned?" The table fell silent. Andrew's hand tightened on his wineglass. The Countess of Wilmington looked scandalized, but Peter Ravensdale's expression changed. Something flickered in his eyes, a spark of surprise that shifted into something darker and more complex. He set down his fork with deliberate care and met her gaze fully. "The truth, Miss Wycliffe." His voice was low, roughened by years of shouting commands across battlefields, and it sent a shiver down her spine. "I think about silence and how loudly it can scream. I think about men who speak of war as glory when they have never smelled death. And I think about how rarely anyone asks questions that require honest answers." The silence deepened. Charlotte felt Andrew stiffen beside her, felt the weight of disapproving stares from the matrons nearby. But she did not look away from Peter Ravensdale. "Then perhaps," she said quietly, "you should surround yourself with people brave enough to hear the truth." His eyes held hers for another heartbeat. Then, for the first time that evening, the corner of his mouth lifted in something that was not quite a smile, but felt more genuine than anything else in that gilded room. "Perhaps I should," he said. Charlotte turned back to her plate, her pulse racing, aware that something had shifted in a way she could not yet name. Aware that across the table, Peter Ravensdale had stopped looking for the exits. And aware, with a certainty that both thrilled and terrified her, that this winter evening in Mayfair had just changed the course of her carefully planned life. The dinner continued around them, but Charlotte tasted nothing. She felt only the weight of a dark gaze that had finally found something worth looking at, and the dangerous quickening of her own heart in response. The music room glowed with candlelight, the flames reflected in the polished surface of the pianoforte that dominated one corner. Charlotte stood near the instrument, acutely aware of the eyes upon her. After dinner, the ladies and gentlemen had reconvened for entertainment, and Lady Redmond had made her expectations clear with a pointed look and a gracious smile. "Miss Wycliffe plays beautifully," their hostess had announced. "Perhaps she would honor us this evening." There had been no polite way to refuse. Charlotte settled onto the bench, arranging her sage green skirts with hands that trembled slightly. She had played in company countless times before, performing the pretty pieces expected of accomplished young ladies. But tonight felt different. Tonight, she felt observed in a way that had nothing to do with musical critique. She began with a Mozart sonata, her fingers finding the familiar patterns. The room fell respectfully quiet, conversations dimming to whispers. Charlotte focused on the keys, on the rise and fall of the melody. trying to lose herself in the mathematics of rhythm and tone. But she felt him watching. Peter Ravensdale stood near the fireplace, one hand resting on the mantel, his dark eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her breath catch. He was not watching her performance. He was watching her hands as they moved across the keys, watching the slight tilt of her head when she reached a difficult passage, watching the way her shoulders relaxed into the music as though it were the only place she could truly breathe. The realization sent heat through her chest. She finished the sonata to polite applause. Beatrice smiled encouragingly from her seat. Andrew nodded with the satisfied expression of a man whose future wife had performed adequately. But Peter Ravensdale did not applaud. He simply continued watching, and when their eyes met across the room, Charlotte saw something in his expression that made her forget where she was. "Quite lovely," Lady Redmond declared. "You have such delicate touch, my dear." Charlotte rose from the bench, intending to retreat to safety among the other young ladies. But before she could move, Peter Ravensdale crossed the room with the purposeful stride of a man who had made a decision. The conversations around them stuttered into silence. He stopped just close enough that she could smell the faint scent of soap and something darker, like leather and winter air. His evening gloves were black, hers pale ivory. The space between them felt charged with possibility. "You play as though the music matters," he said quietly, his voice pitched for her alone despite their audience. "Not as though you are simply performing a duty." Charlotte's pulse quickened. "Is there a difference, Your Grace? There is everything different between doing something because you must and doing it because you need to." His gaze held hers with unwavering directness. "You play like someone who needs to breathe." The words landed in her chest like stones dropped into still water, sending ripples through everything she thought she understood about herself. No one had ever spoken to her this way. No one had ever suggested that her carefully cultivated accomplishments might be more than just the trappings of proper breeding. "I had not thought of it that way," she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Perhaps you should." Andrew materialized at her elbow with the timing of a man asserting ownership. "There you are, Charlotte. I was just telling Sir Edmund about the improvements we plan for the East Wing after the wedding. You remember we discussed the new morning room?" Charlotte forced herself to focus on her betrothed. Of course. The morning room with the southern exposure. Precisely. Andrew turned to Peter with a smile that did not quite reach his eyes. "Your Grace, I hope you will visit us at Harbury House once we are settled. Charlotte will make an excellent hostess. She has been trained for it since childhood." The words were meant to establish territory, to remind everyone in the room that Charlotte's future was already decided. But something flashed in Peter Ravensdale's expression, something cold and sharp. "Training," he said softly, "makes excellent soldiers, Lord Harbury. I wonder if it makes happy wives." The silence that fell was absolute. Andrew's face flushed. "I beg your pardon." Peter's gaze never left Charlotte. "I merely observe that Miss Wycliffe seems to possess depths that might be better served by curiosity than by duty. But perhaps I misunderstand the nature of modern marriages." Charlotte felt as though she was standing at the edge of a precipice. Every instinct screamed that she should smooth over this moment, should laugh and deflect and return everyone to comfortable propriety. But when she opened her mouth, different words emerged. "Perhaps," she said, meeting Peter's dark eyes, "some of us have not had the luxury of considering what we might prefer. We accept what is arranged and make the best of it." "And is that enough?" Peter asked. "Making the best of it?" Andrew's hand closed around her arm, not painfully but firmly. "Charlotte, I think you must be tired. Perhaps we should—" "I am not tired," Charlotte heard herself say. She gently pulled her arm free, maintaining her composure even as her heart raced. "And I believe His Grace asked me a question." Peter Ravensdale's expression shifted, something like approval flickering in his eyes. He took a small step back, restoring proper distance, but his attention remained absolute. "Then allow me to rephrase," he said. "Do you believe contentment is the highest aim to which one should aspire, Miss Wycliffe? Or do you think there might be something more?" Charlotte was aware of the room around them, of mothers leaning in to catch every word, of Andrew's barely contained anger, of Beatrice's wide-eyed fascination. She was aware that her answer would be discussed in every drawing room in Mayfair by tomorrow afternoon. She was also aware that Peter Ravensdale was asking her something no one else ever had. He was asking her to be honest. "I think," she said carefully, "that contentment is what we are taught to value because it asks nothing dangerous of us. But I also think that some part of us always knows when we are settling for less than we might have been." The room seemed to hold its breath. Peter Ravensdale's mouth curved in that ghost of a smile she had seen at dinner. "Then perhaps we are not so different, Miss Wycliffe. I spent years following orders and telling myself it was enough. It took coming home to realize I had forgotten how to want anything for myself. What do you want now?" The question escaped before Charlotte could stop it. His eyes held hers with an intensity that made her feel as though they were alone in the room. To remember what it feels like to be alive, rather than simply surviving. And to spend time with people who understand the difference. Andrew cleared his throat loudly. "Charlotte, your mother is gesturing. I believe she wishes to depart." Charlotte blinked, the spell breaking. She glanced toward the doorway where her mother stood with the Countess's shawl, her expression carefully neutral, but her eyes sharp with warning. "Of course." She turned back to Peter, suddenly uncertain. "Good evening, Your Grace." He bowed, a gesture of perfect propriety that somehow felt like a promise. "Miss Wycliffe, I hope we may continue this conversation another time." Charlotte managed a nod before Andrew guided her firmly toward her mother, but as she crossed the room, she felt Peter Ravensdale's gaze on her back like a physical touch, and she knew with absolute certainty that something fundamental had shifted. In the carriage ride home, her mother said nothing about the exchange, but her silence spoke volumes. Andrew sat stiffly beside Charlotte, his jaw tight, but Charlotte barely noticed. She was too busy remembering the way Peter Ravensdale had looked at her hands on the piano keys, the way he had defended her right to want something more than contentment, the way his words had peeled back layers of pretense she had not even known she was wearing. For the first time in her 23 years, Charlotte Wycliffe understood what it meant to be truly seen, and she could not decide if the feeling was liberation or terror. Hyde Park at the fashionable hour was a parade of society's finest. Carriages rolled along winding paths, their occupants nodding with practiced precision. Ladies strolled beneath parasols despite the winter chill, while gentlemen on horseback tipped their hats and exchanged meaningless pleasantries. Charlotte sat in her family's carriage beside her mother, a fur-lined blanket across her knees. 3 days had passed since Lady Redmond's dinner party. 3 days of thinking about dark eyes and dangerous questions. Her mother had not mentioned the exchange with the Duke of Blackthorn, but her increased vigilance spoke clearly enough. Charlotte had been kept busy with morning calls, trousseau fittings and wedding discussions. Every moment filled, leaving no space for reflection. The Countess maintained a serene expression as she nodded to passing acquaintances, but Charlotte felt the tension in her posture, the way her gloved hands gripped her reticule too tightly. The story of Charlotte's conversation with the Duke of War had spread through Mayfair like wildfire. "Your father wishes to speak with you this evening," her mother said quietly, "about appropriate conduct and discretion." Charlotte's stomach tightened. "Yes, Mama. Lord Harbury has been very understanding. He recognizes that the Duke of Blackthorn can be overwhelming. Andrew does not hold your momentary lapse against you." The word stung. A momentary lapse in judgment, as though honesty had been a mistake rather than a revelation. Charlotte opened her mouth to respond, but the words died. Peter Ravensdale was riding toward them. He sat astride a magnificent black stallion, controlling the powerful animal with easy confidence. He wore dark riding clothes, no ornamentation except his signet ring. Charlotte would have recognized him anywhere by the coiled alertness that never left him. Their eyes met, and something passed between them that needed no words. He guided his horse alongside their carriage with cavalry precision. The stallion tossed its head, and Peter's hand moved imperceptibly on the reins, bringing the animal to stillness. "Lady Wycliffe, Miss Wycliffe." He touched his hat brim. "A fine afternoon for the park." Charlotte's mother smiled with brittle courtesy. "Your Grace." "Indeed, though the wind is rather sharp. Then perhaps I might steal a moment of Miss Wycliffe's time." His gaze found Charlotte's, unwavering. "With your permission, a brief walk, within sight of all, entirely proper." The request was bold, pushing at boundaries in ways that could not be misunderstood. "I am not certain that would be wise," the Countess began. "I would welcome the exercise, Mamma," Charlotte said. "As you said, it is cold, sitting still." Peter dismounted in one fluid motion, handing his stallion's reins to a waiting groom. He offered his hand to Charlotte, helping her down with a touch that burned through 2 layers of gloves. "We shall remain visible at all times," he assured the Countess. "You have my word." The Countess's expression suggested she doubted Peter Ravensdale fit the definition of gentleman, but she could hardly refuse without causing a scene. 10 minutes, Your Grace. No more." Charlotte placed her hand in the crook of Peter's arm. The contact was perfectly acceptable, yet she felt it in every nerve. His forearm was solid beneath her fingers, warm despite the winter air. For several paces, neither spoke. Charlotte was aware of eyes upon them, of whispers rippling through the park, but she was more aware of the man beside her, of how his breathing had changed when he touched her. "I am told I caused you difficulty," Peter said quietly. "After the dinner party." Charlotte kept her gaze forward. "You spoke honestly. If that causes difficulty, the fault lies with those who prefer comfortable lies." His hand tightened over hers on his arm. "You should not have to pay for my honesty. Perhaps I am tired of paying for everyone else's comfort." They reached a curve in the path, screened by winter-bare trees. Peter slowed, turning so his body blocked the view of passers-by. To anyone watching, they examined the distant serpentine. But Charlotte felt the intensity of his focus. 3 weeks, he said quietly. "Give me 3 weeks." Charlotte's breath caught. "I do not understand." "Yes, you do." His dark eyes held hers with fierce certainty. 3 weeks to prove you were not meant for a cage. Nothing improper. Nothing that would truly compromise you. Just time enough to remember what it feels like to be Charlotte rather than the Earl's daughter or Harbury's intended. Her heart hammered. "What you are suggesting is dangerous." "I know," his voice roughened. "But I watched you play that pianoforte and I saw someone drowning in propriety. I will not watch you marry a man who sees you as a possession. Lord Harbury is kind. Kindness is not enough, not for someone like you." "How would you know what I am like?" Charlotte demanded, her voice shaking. "You have spoken to me twice." Peter's free hand rose slowly. His gloved finger traced along the edge of her blanket, so close to her own hand that she felt his heat through the fabric. The gesture was barely contact, yet it sent shivers through her entire body. "I know," he said softly, "because I recognize what I see in your eyes. The same thing that stares back at me every morning. The knowledge that you are capable of so much more than the life you have been given permission to live." Charlotte could not breathe. She was aware only of his finger against the blanket, a fraction from her hand, and the way her entire being leaned toward that almost touch. "What do you want from me?" she whispered. "Everything you are willing to give." His voice was rough velvet. "And nothing you are not." The moment stretched between them, taut as a bowstring. Charlotte knew she should refuse, should turn away from this man who made her feel too much. She should return to the safe, predictable future awaiting her. But different words emerged. 3 weeks. Peter's eyes darkened with something fierce and tender. 3 weeks. "How will I—" "A note will arrive this evening." His gaze flicked toward her mother's carriage. "When you can ride. Early, before the park fills. Just you and me in the morning." Charlotte's pulse raced. "That is improper." The ghost of a smile touched his mouth. "Only if someone sees us. And I am very good at strategy, Miss Wycliffe." He stepped back, restoring proper distance, but his eyes held a promise that made her feel the ground had shifted. They walked back in silence, but Charlotte felt energy humming between them like an invisible cord. Her mother watched their approach with narrowed eyes. Peter handed Charlotte up with perfect courtesy, his touch lingering just a heartbeat longer than necessary. "Thank you for the walk, Your Grace," Charlotte said, her voice steady despite the chaos in her chest. "The pleasure was entirely mine, Miss Wycliffe." His gaze held hers. "I hope we may repeat it soon." He bowed before mounting his stallion in one smooth motion. Charlotte watched him ride away, his figure growing smaller against the grey winter sky. "Well," her mother said icily, "that was certainly a spectacle." Charlotte said nothing. She was too busy feeling the phantom touch of his finger near her hand, memorizing how his voice had sounded when he said everything you are willing to give. That evening a note arrived. delivered by a plain messenger, addressed only with her name. Inside, in bold script, were 3 words and a time. Tomorrow. Dawn. Serpentine. Charlotte held the paper in trembling hands and knew she stood at a crossroads. One path led to safety, to the life she had always known. The other led into the unknown, guided by the dark eyes of a man who saw her as she truly was. She burned the note in her candle flame and watched the paper curl into ash. Then she laid out her riding habit for the morning. Dawn broke over London in shades of pearl and rose. Charlotte had slipped from the house while servants lit fires, her maid bribed with coins and silence. The lie she had told her mother burned in her chest, but not enough to turn back. The Serpentine emerged from the mist like something from a dream. Charlotte's heart hammered as she guided her mare along the empty path, wondering if she had imagined everything. Then she saw him. Peter Ravensdale stood beside 2 horses beneath the elms, but beside his black stallion stood a chestnut mare, her coat gleaming like burnished copper. Charlotte dismounted, and a groom appeared to take her reins. Peter approached, something softer in his expression. "Good morning, Miss Wycliffe." His voice was low, intimate. "I was not entirely certain you would come." "I said I would. People say many things they do not mean. Do you?" "No. Which is why I have so few friends." She looked past him to the chestnut mare, who watched her with intelligent eyes. "She is beautiful. Her name is Tempest." Peter ran a hand along the mare's neck. "I bought her 2 days ago, for a rider who was not born to go slowly." Charlotte's breath caught. "You bought her for me, for someone who deserves to know what freedom feels like." His eyes found hers, someone who plays like she is drowning and needs the music to breathe. Charlotte approached Tempest slowly. The mare nickered, nuzzling her palm. "What if I cannot ride well enough? Then I will teach you. But I suspect you can do anything you set your mind to, Charlotte. You simply have not been given permission to try." The use of her given name sent electricity down her spine. "Shall we?" Peter helped her mount, his hands firm at her waist. Even through layers of fabric, she felt his heat, his strength. He lifted her into the saddle with ease, his touch lingering. When he mounted his stallion, Charlotte saw the transformation. Here Peter belonged. The tension in his shoulders eased. "Follow me, and trust Tempest." They started at a walk, then Peter urged his stallion into a trot. When he looked back, his eyes held a challenge. "Can you keep up?" His stallion leaped into a canter, and Tempest surged beneath Charlotte, eager and willing. The mare was responsive, and Charlotte found herself laughing as they flew along the path. The wind tore at her hair. Her hat came loose. The world blurred into motion and speed and the thundering of her heart. This was what he had meant, this feeling of breaking free from every constraint. They galloped until they reached elms at the far end, away from any path. Peter slowed, and Charlotte drew alongside him, breathless and glowing. "I have never felt anything like that. That is how you should feel every day. Not caged, free." The mist swirled around them, creating a private world where propriety seemed far away. Peter dismounted and came to her side. He reached up, and Charlotte slid from the saddle into his arms. For one suspended moment, they stood close enough that she could feel his breath. His hands remained at her waist, and Charlotte's palms rested against his chest. She felt his heart racing. Charlotte. Her name was a question and a prayer. She looked up at this man who truly saw her. "I should warn you." Peter's voice was rough. "If you do not step away now, I am going to kiss you." Charlotte's pulse thundered. The proper response would be to retreat, but she was tired of being proper. "Then, do not make me wait," she whispered. Peter's eyes darkened. His hand rose slowly to her face, giving her every chance to refuse. His fingers traced her jaw with gentleness that belied the tension in his frame. "Tell me if you want me to stop." Then he kissed her. Peter's mouth was firm but tender against hers, tasting of morning and possibility. His hand cupped her face while the other remained at her waist, holding her steady as the world tilted. Charlotte's hands moved from his chest to his shoulders, clutching his coat. The kiss deepened and she felt Peter's control waver, felt the tremor in his hands as he pulled her closer. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Peter pressed his forehead to hers. His hands trembled. "I did not plan that." I promised myself I would be a gentleman. Perhaps I prefer you when you are not entirely a gentleman. What are we doing, Charlotte? I do not know, but I know I do not want to stop. Peter's thumb traced her lower lip. Even if it leads nowhere good. Charlotte thought of Andrew, of her parents, of the life awaiting her. Then she thought of how she had felt on Tempest's back, racing through the mist with her heart alive. I have spent my entire life being good, being proper, doing what was expected. And I've been utterly miserable without realizing it until you asked me that question at dinner. Peter's hand moved to cradle the back of her head, fingers threading through her disheveled hair. And now I want to know what it feels like to choose something for myself. Even if only for 3 weeks, the vulnerability in her admission seemed to break something in Peter. He pulled her close, this time in an embrace. Charlotte rested her head against his chest and felt the rapid beat of his heart matching her own. 3 weeks. I will give you 3 weeks of mornings like this, of feeling alive. And at the end, whatever you choose, I will honor it. Charlotte breathed in the scent of him, leather and soap. She knew this was dangerous, knew every moment with him pulled her further from the life she was supposed to want. But when she lifted her face to his, she was smiling. Then we should not waste a single morning. Peter's answering smile transformed his face. He kissed her forehead with tenderness that made her throat tight, then stepped back. We should return before the park fills. But tomorrow? Tomorrow. They rode back slowly, side by side, their horses close enough that Charlotte's knee occasionally brushed Peter's. The silence was comfortable, full of shared understanding. When they reached where they had met, Peter helped her dismount from Tempest. Keep her. She is yours. Stable her wherever you wish, but she belongs to you now. I cannot possibly— Yes, you can. Let me give you this, Charlotte. Let me give you the means to be free, even if only for an hour each morning. Charlotte looked at the chestnut mare, at this gift that represented Peter's belief in who she could be. Thank you. Peter mounted his stallion, but before he rode away, he looked back. Until tomorrow, Charlotte. Until tomorrow. She watched him disappear into the brightening morning, then pressed her fingers to her lips, still feeling the ghost of his kiss. The mist was burning off, and London was waking. Soon she would return home and resume being the Earl's dutiful daughter. But for now, Charlotte Wycliffe knew exactly what freedom tasted like, and she wanted more. 3 weeks became a rhythm of stolen mornings and careful deceptions. Charlotte rode Tempest through misted dawns while London slept, and with each sunrise, she fell deeper into a world she had never known existed. Peter taught her to jump low hedges, to feel the horse's intentions through subtle shifts of muscle and breath. But more than that, he taught her to trust herself, to make decisions without seeking permission, to laugh without covering her mouth, to speak without weighing every word for propriety. The rest of her days became a performance she barely recognized. At breakfast, she discussed wedding linens with her mother. At afternoon calls, she smiled at ladies who whispered behind their fans. At dinners and balls and theater outings, she stood beside Andrew and played the role of contented bride-to-be. But her eyes always searched for one dark figure in every crowded room. Peter was everywhere and nowhere. He appeared at the opera, sitting in a box across from theirs, his gaze finding hers during the intermission. He materialized at Lady Ashford's musicale, standing near the back while Charlotte performed, and she played for him alone. He rode through Hyde Park at the fashionable hour, never approaching but always visible, a constant reminder of their secret world. He never once compromised her, never gave the gossips ammunition. Yet somehow, his very presence felt like a claim. Charlotte stood in the conservatory at the Pemberton Ball, seeking air away from the suffocating heat of dancing bodies. The glass walls revealed a garden bathed in moonlight, and she pressed her palm against the cool pane, thinking of morning mist and freedom. You look as though you wish to escape. She turned to find Beatrice approaching, concern in her blue eyes. Her friend had been watching her with increasing worry these past weeks. Just needed a moment, Charlotte said, forcing a smile. Beatrice moved closer, lowering her voice. Charlotte, what is happening? You are different. You smile at all the right times, say all the proper things, but your eyes are somewhere else entirely. Charlotte's throat tightened. Am I so transparent? Only to someone who knows you. Beatrice glanced toward the ballroom, then back. It is the Duke of Blackthorn, is it not? Everyone has noticed how he appears wherever you are. How you never look at each other yet, seem always aware of where the other stands. There was no judgment in Beatrice's voice, only friendship and fear. I do not know what I am doing, Charlotte admitted quietly. I only know that when I am with him, I remember who I might have been before I was taught to be someone else. And Lord Harbury, Andrew is kind. He will give me a comfortable life. But Peter makes me feel alive. Beatrice took her hand, squeezing gently. Then you must decide which matters more, comfort or life. But decide soon before the choice is made for you. Before Charlotte could respond, a footman appeared with a silver tray bearing a single note. For Miss Wycliffe. Charlotte's fingers trembled as she broke the seal. Inside, in Peter's bold script, were few words. The terrace, when you can slip away unseen. She looked up to find Beatrice watching her with knowing eyes. Go, her friend said softly, but be careful. Your father has been speaking with Andrew. I think they suspect something. Charlotte's heart lurched, but she nodded. She waited until Beatrice returned to the ballroom, then slipped through a side door onto the terrace. The night air was sharp after the conservatory's warmth. She moved along the stone balustrade, past pools of light from the windows, toward the darker end where shadows offered privacy. Peter emerged from those shadows like something conjured from her thoughts. Without a word, he pulled her into the shelter of a climbing rose arbor, his body blocking her from view of the house. His hands found her face, tilting it up, and in the moonlight she could see the tension in his features. Your father has set a date, he said without preamble. The banns are to be read starting Sunday, 6 weeks until your wedding. Charlotte felt the ground shift. I did not know. Andrew told me tonight. Very cordially informed me that I should prepare to toast his happiness. Peter's jaw tightened, as though I could stand in a church and watch you promise yourself to a man who will never deserve you. Charlotte's hands rose to cover his where they cupped her face. What do we do? His eyes searched hers, dark and desperate. Tell me you feel what I feel. Tell me this is not just rebellion against your circumstances. It is not rebellion. Charlotte's voice broke. Peter, I have spent 3 weeks learning what it means to breathe, and the thought of going back to that suffocating life terrifies me more than any scandal. Then come away with me. The words hung between them, impossible and inevitable. What? Not tonight. Not scandalously. Peter's thumb traced her cheekbone. But soon. Let me arrange for a special license. Let me speak to your father. Try to end this engagement honorably. And if he refuses, if they all refuse, then we leave together and face whatever comes. Charlotte's breath caught. You would risk everything? Your reputation? Your standing? His laugh was rough. Charlotte, I have already risked everything. The moment I saw you on that staircase, the moment you asked me about truth instead of glory, I was lost. There is no going back for me. The only question is whether you are willing to take that step forward. Her heart hammered against her ribs. If we do this, I lose my family. My father will disown me. Then he is a fool who never deserved you, and society will call me a scandal. Let them. Peter pulled her closer, his forehead pressing to hers. I would rather have you scandalized and whole than proper and hollow. But Charlotte, this has to be your choice. I will not drag you into a life you do not want. What life do you offer? Honesty. His voice was raw. A home where you can breathe. Mornings on horseback and evenings by the fire. A man who will never try to tame you because he loves you exactly as you are, wild and brilliant and free. Charlotte's eyes burned with unshed tears. You love me? God help me, I do. Completely. Impossibly. From the first moment you looked at me and saw a man instead of a weapon. The admission broke something open in Charlotte's chest. She rose on her toes and kissed him, pouring 3 weeks of longing and fear and desperate hope into the contact. Peter responded with fierce tenderness, one hand threading through her hair while the other pressed her close. The kiss was urgent, speaking everything they could not say aloud. When they broke apart, both were trembling. I need time, Charlotte whispered, to speak with my mother to try to make them understand. 1 week. Give me 1 week to attempt this properly. And if they refuse, then I choose you. The certainty in her voice surprised them both. I choose life over comfort. I choose you. Peter's eyes blazed. 1 week. But Charlotte, if they try to force this wedding sooner, if they sense what is happening, send word immediately. I will come for you. How? Trust me. His smile was grim. I have extracted men from far more dangerous situations than a Mayfair townhouse. Despite everything, Charlotte laughed. You are entirely improper, Your Grace, and you love me for it. I do. The words escaped before she could stop them, but she did not want to. I love you, Peter Ravensdale. I do not know when it happened, but I love you completely. Peter kissed her again, softer this time, reverent. Then we fight for this. Together. Together. They stood holding each other in the shadows, knowing the battle ahead would be brutal, knowing they might lose everything. But in that moment, wrapped in each other's arms with moonlight filtering through roses, they also knew something more important. Some loves were worth fighting for, some freedoms were worth the cost, and some cages, no matter how gilded, were meant to be broken. Charlotte pressed closer, feeling Peter's heart beat against hers, and made her choice. She would speak to her father tomorrow, and if he refused to listen, she would fly. Before we continue with what happens next, I want to pause for just a moment. If you are enjoying Charlotte and Peter's story, if their struggle for love and freedom is resonating with you, would you consider subscribing to the channel? Your support helps me bring more stories like this to life, and I would love to hear from you in the comments. What would you do in Charlotte's position? Would you choose security or follow your heart? Let me know your thoughts below. Now, let us see what happens when Charlotte faces her father. The morning after the Pemberton ball, Charlotte requested an audience with her father. The Earl of Wycliffe received her in his study, a room that smelled of leather and tobacco, where generations of decisions had been made without consulting the women they affected. He did not invite her to sit. I assume this concerns the Duke of Blackthorn, he said, not looking up from his correspondence. Your mother has made me aware of certain observations. Charlotte's hands trembled, but she kept her voice steady. Father, I wish to speak with you about my engagement to Lord Harbury. There is nothing to discuss. The banns will be read Sunday. The wedding is set for 6 weeks hence. I do not love him. The Earl finally looked at her, his expression cold. Love is a luxury afforded to those without responsibility. You will marry Andrew Harbury because it is an excellent match that has been arranged since you were 17. Your feelings are irrelevant, are they? Charlotte felt something crack inside her. Even if those feelings mean I would be miserable for the rest of my life. You will learn contentment, as your mother did, as all women of breeding do. The casual dismissal of her mother's potential unhappiness struck Charlotte like a blow. She thought of the Countess's careful smiles, her perfect composure, the way she never laughed too loudly or spoke too freely. I will not marry Andrew, Charlotte said quietly. I am in love with Peter Ravensdale, and he wishes to marry me. The silence that followed was terrible. Then her father stood, his face flushing with rage. You foolish, ungrateful child. Do you have any idea what scandal you would bring upon this family? The Duke of Blackthorn is a war-damaged soldier, with nothing to recommend him but a title and a reputation for brutality. He is a good man who sees me as a person rather than a possession. He has bewitched you with romantic nonsense. Her father's voice was ice. You will not see him again. You will marry Andrew in 6 weeks, and if you breathe one word of this foolishness to anyone, I will cut you off without a penny. You will have nothing. Then I will have nothing. The Earl moved around his desk with frightening speed, gripping her arm. You will obey me, Charlotte. I am your father, and you will do as you are told. Charlotte wrenched her arm free, her heart pounding. I am 23 years old, and I am done being told who I must be. If you force this marriage, you will never see me again. Then so be it. The words landed like stones. Her father turned his back to her, returning to his desk as though she had already ceased to exist. Get out of my study. Charlotte fled, her vision blurred with tears. She found her mother in the morning room, embroidering by the window. Mama, she began, but the Countess held up one hand. I heard. Her mother's voice was soft, defeated. "Your father is not a man who changes his mind, Charlotte. I learned that 30 years ago. Did you love him?" The question escaped before Charlotte could stop it. "When you married?" The Countess's hand stilled on her embroidery. "I thought I might. But love was not required, only duty." She looked up, and Charlotte saw something haunted in her eyes. "I have lived a comfortable life, Charlotte. I have wanted for nothing material. But there are nights when I lie awake and wonder what might have been if I had been braver. Mama, go to him." The Countess's whisper was fierce. "Go to your Duke before it is too late. I may not be brave enough to defy your father, but I can give you my blessing." She pressed a small purse into Charlotte's hands. "This is from my own funds. Not much, but enough to help you start. Go tonight before your father can stop you." Charlotte threw her arms around her mother, both of them weeping. "Thank you. Thank you." That evening, Charlotte attended the pre-wedding ball at Harbury House with ice in her veins and fire in her heart. She had sent word to Peter. She had packed a small bag. She was ready. But first, she needed to face Andrew. She found him in the card room, looking pleased with himself as he discussed the wedding breakfast menu. When he saw her, he smiled with proprietary satisfaction. "Charlotte, you look lovely. Come, let me introduce you to Sir Edmund's wife." "May I speak with you privately, my lord?" Something in her tone made him pause. He excused himself and followed her to a quiet corner. "Is something wrong?" "I cannot marry you, Andrew." His expression went blank, then hardened. "This is about Blackthorn. This is about me." Charlotte kept her voice low but firm. "You are a good man, but you do not love me. You love the idea of a suitable wife, a comfortable arrangement. You deserve someone who can be content with that. And you think the Duke of War can make you happy?" Andrew's laugh was bitter. "He is damaged, Charlotte. He wakes screaming from nightmares. He cannot function in society. You will be chained to a broken man." "Then I choose that chain over the gilded cage you offer." Andrew's face flushed. "Your father will never allow this. I'm not asking his permission." For a long moment, Andrew stared at her. Then, surprisingly, his shoulders sagged. "I knew. These past weeks, I knew I had already lost you. I simply hoped you would go through with it anyway, that duty would win over desire." "I am sorry, Andrew. Truly. So am I." He straightened, recovering his dignity. "I will not stand in your way, Charlotte. I will tell your father in the morning that I am ending our engagement. It will cause less scandal than if you simply disappear." The unexpected kindness brought tears to her eyes. "Thank you. Go to him." Andrew's smile was sad. "Before I change my mind and fight for something I never really had." Charlotte kissed his cheek, then slipped away through the crowd. She made her way to the terrace, the same terrace where Peter had first kissed her weeks ago. He was waiting in the shadows, tall and solid and real. Charlotte did not speak. She walked straight into his arms, and he caught her, holding her tight against his chest. "Your father refused," he said against her hair. "It was not a question. He disowned me. And Andrew ended the engagement. Peter, we can leave now. Tonight." He pulled back to look at her face, his hands framing her cheeks. "Are you certain?" "Once we do this, there is no going back. I have never been more certain of anything." Peter kissed her then, and it was different from every kiss before. This was not stolen or secret. This was a claiming, a promise, a beginning. His mouth was urgent against hers, tasting of desperation and relief and fierce joy. Charlotte's hands fisted in his coat, pulling him closer, needing to feel every solid inch of him. His fingers tangled in her carefully arranged hair, destroying the elaborate style, and she did not care. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Peter pressed his forehead to hers. "I have a carriage waiting 2 streets away. We ride to Blackthorn Abbey tonight. My chaplain will marry us at dawn." Charlotte's hand found his face, tracing the scar at his temple. "No regrets?" His eyes blazed in the moonlight. "My only regret would be letting you go. Then take me home, Peter. Take me home." He kissed her once more, soft and reverent, then took her hand. Together they slipped through the garden gate into the London night. Behind them, the ball continued, oblivious. Ahead lay scandal and struggle and uncertain futures. But Charlotte had never felt more free. She was flying at last, and Peter Ravensdale held her hand as she soared. The carriage rolled through the London streets in darkness, Charlotte's hand clasped tightly in Peter's. She had left everything behind except the small bag her maid had smuggled out and the clothes on her back. No jewels, no trousseau, no carefully planned future. Only him and the terrifying freedom of choice. They did not speak during the journey. Words felt inadequate for what they had just done, for what lay ahead. Peter's thumb traced circles on the back of her hand, a steady rhythm that grounded her when panic threatened to surface. What would society say? What would become of her family's reputation? Had she just destroyed everyone she loved for her own selfish desire? Charlotte. Peter's voice cut through her spiraling thoughts. Look at me. She turned to find his dark eyes steady on hers, even in the dim carriage light. You are not selfish for choosing life, he said quietly, as though he had read every doubt crossing her face. You are not cruel for refusing to sacrifice yourself, and you are not alone. Whatever comes, we face it together. Tears burned in Charlotte's eyes. I'm terrified, so am I. His honesty was a gift, but I would rather be terrified with you than safe and hollow without you. She leaned into him, and he wrapped his arm around her shoulders, holding her secure as the carriage carried them away from everything she had ever known. They traveled through the night, changing horses at posting inns where sleepy ostlers asked no questions. Dawn was breaking over Derbyshire when Blackthorn Abbey finally appeared on the horizon. It was not what Charlotte expected. No cold fortress, no imposing monument to ducal power. Instead, she saw honey-colored stone glowing in the early light, surrounded by rolling parkland and ancient oaks. Gardens spread before the house, wild and beautiful rather than rigidly manicured. Home, Peter said softly, and Charlotte heard both pride and vulnerability in the word. It is beautiful. It was falling apart when I inherited it. My uncle cared more for gambling than maintenance. He gestured toward the visible repairs, newer stone mixed with old. I have spent the past 6 months trying to make it livable again. The carriage rolled to a stop, and Peter helped her down. Charlotte's legs were stiff from hours of travel, her ball gown wrinkled and dusty, her hair still disheveled from his hands. She had never felt more alive. An elderly man emerged from the house dressed in clerical robes. Behind him came a housekeeper with kind eyes and graying hair. Your Grace. The chaplain bowed. Everything is prepared, as you requested. Thank you, Father Bennet. Peter turned to Charlotte. This is Mrs. Hughes, my housekeeper. She has arranged rooms for you to refresh yourself if you wish. The chapel is ready whenever you are. Charlotte looked at the house, at the people waiting with careful respect, at Peter standing beside her with hope and fear mingling in his expression. Now, she said, I want to marry you now, before anything can stop us. Peter's face transformed with relief and joy. He offered his arm, and together they walked toward the small chapel attached to the abbey's east wing. The chapel was simple and beautiful. Morning light streamed through stained glass windows, casting colored patterns across stone floors, worn smooth by centuries of feet. Fresh roses filled simple vases, their scent mixing with beeswax and age. Mrs. Hughes and the gardener served as witnesses, standing respectfully at the back. Father Bennet opened his prayer book, and the ancient words began, Dearly beloved, we are gathered here in the sight of God. Charlotte listened to vows that had been spoken for generations, but when Peter turned to face her and took her hands, the words became new. I, Peter Ravensdale, take thee, Charlotte, to be my wedded wife. His voice was steady, his eyes never leaving hers. To have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do us part. His hands trembled slightly on hers, and Charlotte squeezed back, pouring strength into the contact. Then it was her turn. I, Charlotte, take thee, Peter, to be my wedded husband. Her voice rang clear in the small chapel, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do us part. Peter slid a ring onto her finger, a simple gold band that felt solid and real. She had no ring to give him, but Father Bennet had anticipated this, producing another band that Charlotte placed on Peter's hand with shaking fingers. "Those whom God hath joined together, let no man put asunder." Father Bennet smiled. "I now pronounce you man and wife. You may kiss your bride, your grace." Peter's hands framed her face with infinite gentleness. Then he kissed her as her husband for the first time, soft and reverent and full of promises yet to be fulfilled. When they parted, Charlotte was crying, but not from sadness. Mrs. Hughes bustled forward with congratulations. "I have prepared breakfast in the morning room, your grace, and the Duchess's chambers are ready." The Duchess's chambers. Charlotte was a duchess now. The enormity of it threatened to overwhelm her. Peter must have sensed her sudden panic. He thanked the staff and dismissed them kindly, then drew Charlotte aside. "Breathe," he said quietly. "We do not have to do anything you are not ready for. Mrs. Hughes has prepared separate rooms if you prefer. There is no rush." Charlotte looked up at this man who had given her everything, who had risked his reputation and peace to give her freedom. This man who even now offered her space and time. "I do not want separate rooms," she whispered. "I want to be your wife in truth, Peter. I'm simply nervous." His smile was tender. "So am I." He kissed her forehead. "We have our whole lives to learn each other. Today we simply rest and be grateful we are here at all." They broke their fast together in the morning room, sunlight streaming through tall windows. Charlotte was exhausted, but too full of emotion to sleep. Everything felt surreal, like a dream she might wake from. But Peter's hand in hers was solid and warm and real. After breakfast, he showed her the library, the gardens, the stables where Tempest was already settled in a comfortable stall. He showed her the estate with pride and some trepidation, watching her reactions carefully. "What do you think?" he asked finally, as they stood in the rose garden overlooking the valley. "I think," Charlotte said slowly, "that I could be happy here, that I could build a life here with you." Her hand found his. "I think this feels more like home than anywhere I have ever lived." Peter pulled her close, resting his chin on top of her head. "Then we make it home together, however you wish it to be." "I wish it to be honest." Charlotte turned in his arms to face him. "I wish it to be a place where we can both breathe freely, where we help each other rather than pretend to be perfect, where love matters more than propriety." His eyes darkened with emotion. "I can give you that. I will give you that every day for the rest of our lives. Then we have everything we need." As the sun climbed higher over Blackthorn Abbey, Peter and Charlotte stood together in their garden, married and free and terrified and hopeful all at once. The scandal would come. Society's judgment would follow. But in that moment, wrapped in each other's arms with their whole lives stretching ahead, they had exactly what they needed: each other, and a home where they could finally, truly, breathe. Night fell over Blackthorn Abbey like a velvet curtain, soft and encompassing. Charlotte stood in the Duchess's chambers, a room that was now hers, watching rain trace patterns down the tall windows. The storm had rolled in during dinner, bringing with it the rich scent of wet earth and growing things. Mrs. Hughes had helped her out of the wrinkled ball gown and into a nightdress of soft linen, far simpler than the elaborate trousseau she would have had as Andrew's bride. But Charlotte preferred its simplicity, its honesty. A connecting door led to Peter's chambers. It stood slightly ajar, firelight flickering through the gap. Charlotte's heart hammered. She was married now, a wife. And despite her brave words earlier, she was terrified of what came next. A soft knock at the connecting door made her turn. Peter stood in the doorway, still dressed in his shirt and trousers, his feet bare. He looked uncertain, younger somehow without his usual armor of formality. "May I come in?" he asked. Charlotte nodded, not trusting her voice. He entered slowly, closing the door behind him but staying near it, giving her space. The fire in her hearth burned low, casting dancing shadows across the walls. Rain pattered steadily against the windows. "You do not have to be afraid of me," Peter said quietly. "We do not have to do anything tonight. I meant what I said this morning. I am not afraid of you." Charlotte's hands twisted in the fabric of her nightdress. "I am afraid I will not know what to do, that I will disappoint you." Peter crossed the room then, but stopped just out of reach. "Charlotte, look at me." She lifted her eyes to his. "You could never disappoint me." His voice was rough with emotion. Do you know what it means to me that you are here? That you chose this? Chose me? Over everything you were promised? You are the bravest person I have ever known. I do not feel brave. I feel terrified and lost and completely out of my depth. Good. Peter's mouth curved in a slight smile. So do I. We can be terrified together. The admission steadied her. She took a step toward him, then another, until she stood close enough to feel the heat radiating from his body. "Will you show me," she whispered, "how to be with you?" Peter's hand rose slowly to her face, giving her every chance to retreat. His fingers traced the line of her jaw with infinite gentleness. We go slowly. He leaned down until his forehead rested against hers. We talk. We stop whenever you want. And we remember that this is not a performance. There is no right way to do this. There is only us, learning each other. Charlotte's breath shuddered out. "Show me." Peter kissed her then, soft and careful, tasting of wine from dinner and something darker, richer. His lips moved against hers with patient exploration, no rush, no demand, just invitation. Charlotte's hands found his chest, feeling his heart pound beneath her palms. The fine linen of his shirt was warm from his skin, and she could feel the rise and fall of his breathing. "May I?" Peter's fingers traced the edge of her nightdress at her shoulder. "Yes." His hand slid along her collarbone, exploring the curve of her shoulder through the thin fabric. Every touch was deliberate, telegraphed, giving her time to adjust. When his fingers found the pulse point at her throat, Charlotte gasped at the intimacy of it. "You are so beautiful." Peter's voice was reverent. "I have dreamed of this, of having the right to touch you, to hold you, of seeing you without fear between us." He kissed her again, deeper this time, and Charlotte felt her body respond in ways she had never experienced. Heat bloomed in her chest, spreading outward. She pressed closer, and Peter's arms came around her, holding her against the solid warmth of him. Charlotte's fingers found the buttons of his shirt, fumbling with inexperience. Peter stilled, letting her work, his breathing growing rougher with each small victory. When she spread the fabric open, she found the landscape of his chest, scarred and muscled and utterly masculine. There was a long scar across his left side, raised and white against his skin. "From a French sword," he said quietly, watching her face. "Not pretty, I know." Charlotte traced it with gentle fingers, feeling him shiver at her touch. "It is part of you." "How could I find it anything but beautiful?" Peter caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm that sent electricity up her arm. "Charlotte." She looked up, finding his eyes dark with desire and something deeper. Love, absolute and unconditional. He lifted her then, carrying her to the bed with easy strength. The sheets were cool against her back as he laid her down, but Peter's body above hers was warm, solid, real. "Tell me what you feel," he murmured against her neck, his lips tracing the curve of it. "Tell me if anything frightens you." "I feel alive." Charlotte's hands explored the planes of his back, feeling muscle shift beneath skin. "I feel safe. I feel wanted." "You are wanted." Peter's hand slid up her leg, pushing the nightdress higher with aching slowness. So desperately wanted. The storm outside intensified, rain drumming harder against the windows. But inside their room, there was only warmth and discovery, and the gradual surrender of two people who had chosen each other against all reason. Peter's touches grew bolder, more certain, as Charlotte responded with soft sounds and arching movements. He whispered endearments against her skin, told her she was perfect, that he had never felt anything like this. When uncertainty flickered across Charlotte's face, Peter slowed, kissed away her fears, reminded her they had all the time in the world. And when they finally came together, Peter's eyes never left hers. He moved with careful restraint, reading every reaction, adjusting, learning. Charlotte felt a brief moment of discomfort that gave way to something else entirely, a sense of completion she had not known she was missing. Peter. His name was a prayer on her lips. "I am here." His forehead pressed to hers, their breathing synchronized. "I am yours, Charlotte. Always yours." They moved together in the firelight, finding a rhythm as ancient as time itself. Outside, the storm raged. Inside, Two souls learned the language of intimacy, of trust given and honored, of love made tangible. When the intensity peaked and broke, Charlotte held Peter close, feeling his weight settle over her like a benediction. His lips found hers again, tender now, grateful. They lay tangled together afterward, Peter's hand tracing lazy patterns on her shoulder, while Charlotte listened to his heartbeat slow beneath her ear. "You are my peace," Peter whispered into the darkness. "Everything I survived, everything I endured, led me to you. And I would walk through fire 1,000 times to find you again." Charlotte tilted her face up to kiss his jaw. "I chose well." His laugh was soft and full of wonder. "We both did." Rain continued to fall against the windows, but neither noticed anymore. They were too busy discovering that marriage was not just vows and ceremony. It was this: two bodies learning to speak without words, two hearts beating in synchrony, two souls recognizing their mirror. Peter pulled the blankets over them both, keeping her warm against his side. Charlotte's eyes grew heavy with exhaustion and contentment. "Sleep, my love," Peter murmured. "I will keep you safe." And for the first time in her life, Charlotte slept without fear, without pretense, without the weight of expectations. She slept as herself, held by a man who loved every part of who she was. Free at last, and finally home. The first weeks at Blackthorn Abbey were a revelation. Charlotte woke each morning to sunlight streaming through windows that faced the gardens, to Peter's arms still wrapped around her, to the extraordinary freedom of being exactly who she was. But freedom, she learned, came with its own challenges. The scandal reached them in waves, letters from London most unopened, newspapers Mrs. Hughes tried to hide but Charlotte insisted on reading. The Earl's daughter had eloped with the Duke of War. Society was aghast. The Wycliffe name was tarnished. Lord Harbury had been made a fool. Charlotte read the words and felt their sting, but also their diminishing power. Here in Derbyshire, surrounded by rolling hills and honest work, London's judgment seemed very far away. Peter suffered differently. The first time Charlotte heard him screaming, she jolted awake in darkness, heart pounding. Peter thrashed beside her, caught in some nightmare battlefield, his face twisted with anguish. "Peter." She touched his shoulder gently. "Peter, wake up. You are safe." He woke with a gasp, his hand instinctively reaching for a weapon that was not there. For a moment he did not recognize her, and Charlotte saw the soldier he had been, the man trained to kill or be killed. Then awareness returned. "Charlotte, I am here." She pulled him close, feeling his heart hammer against her. "You are home. You are safe." He clung to her in the darkness, his breathing ragged. "I am sorry. I should have warned you. It happens most nights. Then I will be here most nights." Charlotte stroked his hair, feeling the dampness of sweat. "Tell me what you need." "Just this." Peter's voice broke. "Just you reminding me I am not there anymore." So Charlotte learned to wake him gently, to hold him until his breathing steadied, to speak of ordinary things until the nightmares released their grip. She learned which sounds made him flinch, which silences he needed to fill. And Peter learned to let her help, to speak of what he had seen, slowly, painfully, releasing the poison of memories held too long in silence. During the days, Charlotte threw herself into the estate. She opened the library that had been shut for years, cataloguing books and creating a lending system for the village. She studied crop rotation and drainage systems, working with the estate manager to improve tenant farms. When Peter watched her debate irrigation methods with weathered farmers who had worked the land for decades, he smiled with fierce pride. "You are extraordinary," he told her one evening as they walked through fields golden with late summer wheat. "I am useful." Charlotte squeezed his hand. "For the first time in my life, I am actually useful, not ornamental, not performing, just doing work that matters." Peter pulled her close, kissing her temple. "You were always extraordinary, but I am glad you finally have the chance to show it." They established routines, morning rides on Tempest and Peter's stallion, racing through the parkland like children, afternoons working on estate improvements or in the library, evenings by the fire, Peter reading while Charlotte sketched designs for a new school building, and nights learning each other with increasing confidence and joy, the initial shyness giving way to playful exploration, and deep satisfaction. 3 months after their marriage, a letter arrived with the Wycliffe seal. Charlotte stared at it for a long moment before opening it. Peter stood nearby, ready to support whatever she needed. The letter was from her mother. "My dearest Charlotte," it began, "your father remains unmoved, but I cannot bear the silence any longer. I must know that you are well, that you are happy, that I did the right thing in helping you escape." Charlotte's vision blurred with tears as she read her mother's careful words. The Countess spoke of missing her daughter, of defending her choice to anyone who would listen, of the pride she felt in Charlotte's courage, even as society condemned it. "She wants to visit," Charlotte whispered. "She asks if she might come to the Abbey." Peter moved behind her, his hands resting on her shoulders. "What do you want?" "I want my mother." Charlotte turned in his arms. "I want her to see that I am happy, that this was not a mistake." "Is that terribly selfish? It is terribly human." Peter kissed her forehead. "Invite her. Let her see what we have built together." The Countess arrived 2 weeks later, traveling quietly to avoid scandal. Charlotte waited on the front steps, her heart in her throat as the carriage rolled to a stop. Her mother emerged, older somehow, but with light in her eyes that Charlotte had never seen before. "Mama." They embraced, both weeping. Months of separation and fear and love pouring out in that single moment. "Let me see you." The Countess held Charlotte at arm's length. "You look radiant, my darling. Absolutely radiant." "I am happy, Mama." Charlotte's voice shook. "So very happy. I can see that." Peter emerged from the house and Charlotte watched her mother's expression carefully, but the Countess surprised her by curtsying with genuine respect. "Your Grace. Thank you for making my daughter smile like that. I have not seen that particular expression since she was a child." Peter bowed. "The honor is entirely mine, Lady Wycliffe. Your daughter makes me remember what it means to be fully alive." Over the next 3 days, the Countess toured the estate, watched Charlotte work with tenant families, saw the village school plans taking shape. She sat by the fire in the evenings while Peter and Charlotte discussed poetry and politics and agricultural improvements with equal passion. On the final morning, as they prepared her departure, the Countess took Charlotte's hands. "I was wrong to doubt." Tears shone in her eyes. "I spent 30 years convincing myself that contentment was enough, that love was a luxury. But watching you these past days, seeing you with him, I understand now what I missed, what I gave up without even knowing what I was surrendering. Mama, your father will come around eventually. Men of his generation do not change quickly, but they do change." The Countess glanced toward Peter, who waited respectfully at a distance. "You found something rare, Charlotte. A man who sees you as an equal, who celebrates your strength rather than trying to diminish it. Hold on to that. Fight for it every day." "I will." The Countess kissed her daughter's forehead. "I am proud of you. So very proud." After her mother left, Charlotte stood in Peter's arms and wept, releasing months of tension and fear. "She will bring him around," Peter murmured. "Your mother is formidable when she chooses to be." Charlotte laughed through her tears. "Like mother, like daughter, exactly like that." Peter tilted her face up to his. "You saved us both, you know. I was drowning in silence and nightmares, convinced I was too broken to deserve happiness. Then you walked into that ballroom and asked me about truth instead of glory. And you gave me permission to be whole." They stood together as autumn painted the hills gold and crimson, as the village school took shape, as nightmares came less frequently and laughter came more easily. They stood together and built something neither had known was possible. Not a fairy tale, not perfection, but a life honest and full and entirely their own. And that, Charlotte thought as she watched Peter smile at something the gardener said, was worth every scandal, every sacrifice, every moment of fear. That was worth everything. 5 years had transformed Blackthorn Abbey from a crumbling estate into something alive and thriving. The gardens bloomed with careful attention, the tenant farms prospered, and the village school Charlotte had designed now housed 30 children learning to read and cipher. But the greatest transformation had happened within its walls. Charlotte stood in the library, autumn sunlight streaming through tall windows, reviewing plans for a new irrigation system. At her feet, 4-year-old Edward pushed toy soldiers across the carpet with serious concentration. narrating an elaborate battle that involved far more dragons than historical accuracy would allow. "Mama," he announced without looking up, "Papa says dragons are not real, but I think he is wrong." "Does he?" Charlotte smiled, not pausing in her work. "And what makes you think that? Because how else do you explain love?" Edward looked up with Peter's dark eyes in a child's round face. "Papa says love is like magic, and magic is real, so dragons must be real too." Charlotte's throat tightened with emotion. "Your father has a point." The sound of laughter drifted through the open window. Charlotte glanced out to see Peter in the garden, with 2-year-old Margaret perched on his shoulders, her chubby hands tangled in his hair. He was showing her the roses, naming colors, letting her smell each bloom. The Duke of War, society had called him. Cold, unfeeling, impossible to tame. But Charlotte knew better. She had never wanted to tame him. She had only wanted to love him as he was and to be loved in return. Edward abandoned his soldiers and climbed into Charlotte's lap, a rare moment of stillness from her energetic son. She wrapped her arms around him, breathing in the scent of sunshine and boy. "Tell me the story again," he demanded, "about how you and Papa met." Charlotte laughed. "I have told you 100 times. Tell me 101. So Charlotte told him, simplifying for young ears but keeping the essential truth, about a ballroom and a question about honesty, about morning rides and stolen kisses, about choosing love over comfort, freedom over a cage. "And then, what happened?" Edward asked, though he knew every word. "Then we came here. We built a home. We made you and your sister, and we lived happily." Edward frowned. "That is not how the story ends." "How does it end then?" "It does not end." His certainty was absolute. "Because you and Papa still love each other every day. The story keeps going." Charlotte pressed a kiss to his dark hair, marveling at the wisdom of children. "You are absolutely right." Peter entered the library then, Margaret still on his shoulders, both of them laughing. His hair was longer than it had been 5 years ago, touched with grey at the temples. Lines creased the corners of his eyes from smiling, not from war. He had changed. They both had. But the essential truth of them remained. "There you are," Peter said, his eyes finding Charlotte's with the same intensity as that first night in Mayfair. "Edward, your mother needs rescuing. Margaret has decided she must inspect every single book, and I fear for the lower shelves. I will help." Edward scrambled down and rushed to his sister with the enthusiasm of a boy who loved any excuse for chaos. Peter crossed to Charlotte, pulling her to her feet and into his arms. The embrace was comfortable, familiar, yet still sent warmth through her chest. "I saw the new drainage plans," he murmured against her hair. "Brilliant, as always. The tenants deserve infrastructure that works." Charlotte leaned into his strength. "We have the funds now, why not use them properly? This is why I love you." Peter pulled back to look at her face. "You could have spent my money on gowns and jewels. Instead, you build schools and drainage ditches. The gowns would not make anyone's life better. They would make you look stunning, though you manage that without them." Charlotte laughed, rising on her toes to kiss him. "Flatterer. Truth-teller." Peter's hands framed her face. "Have I told you today that you are extraordinary?" "Only twice." I was beginning to worry. They were interrupted by a crash from the children's corner, followed by Margaret's delighted shriek and Edward's apologetic explanation. Peter sighed with exaggerated patience. "They are yours when they are destructive," he told Charlotte, "and yours when they are stubborn. Then they are entirely mine." Peter kissed her forehead. "I will manage the chaos. You finish your work." But Charlotte caught his hand. "Peter, thank you." "For what?" "For this." She gestured to the library, the children, the life they had built. "For seeing me when no one else did. For loving me enough to let me be whole." His expression softened, vulnerability flickering across features that had once been so guarded. "Charlotte, you saved me from a half-life of going through motions and calling it survival. Everything good in my world exists because you were brave enough to ask me about truth instead of glory. We saved each other." "Yes." Peter pulled her close again. "We did." That evening, after the children were settled and the house had quieted, Charlotte and Peter sat by the fire in their private sitting room. Rain pattered gently against the windows, but inside all was warm and peaceful. Peter read aloud from a book of poetry, while Charlotte sketched plans for expanding the village school. Occasionally their eyes would meet, and no words were necessary. A knock interrupted the companionable silence. Mrs. Hughes entered with an apologetic expression and a letter bearing the Wycliffe seal. Charlotte's heart quickened. Since her mother's first visit, correspondence had been regular, but her father had remained silent. Until now. She broke the seal with trembling fingers. "My daughter," it began, and Charlotte's vision blurred immediately. "I have been a stubborn fool, and your mother has spent 5 years ensuring I know it. I wish to visit, to meet my grandchildren, to see the life you have built. If you will permit an old man his pride one more time, I would like to apologize in person." Charlotte read the words twice, then handed the letter to Peter without speaking. He read it, then looked at her with understanding. "What do you want?" "I want him to see that I was right, that this life, this choice, this love was worth every sacrifice." Her voice steadied. "I want him to meet Edward and Margaret. I want him to see you as you are, not as society painted you. Then we invite him." Peter took her hand. "We show him what we have built from honesty and courage and love that refused to be caged." Yes. 2 weeks later, the Earl of Wycliffe arrived at Blackthorn Abbey. He was older, his back not quite as straight, his expression less certain than Charlotte remembered. But when Edward ran to greet his grandfather with innocent enthusiasm, when Margaret offered him a flower with sticky hands, when the Earl saw his daughter glowing with genuine happiness beside a man who clearly worshipped her, something in his face crumbled. "I was wrong," he said quietly that evening, the adults alone by the fire. "I thought I was protecting you. I thought duty and station mattered more than happiness. But seeing you here, seeing what you have built, I understand what I almost destroyed." Charlotte took her father's hand. "I forgive you, Papa. I forgave you years ago." The Earl's eyes glistened. "You are remarkable, both of you. This life you have created, these children, this work you do for the community. You have achieved something I never managed. You are truly happy. We are." Peter's arm came around Charlotte's shoulders. "Every single day." As autumn deepened into winter, as the children grew and the estate flourished, Charlotte often thought about that night in Mayfair when everything had changed. They had called Peter the Duke of War, as though he were a weapon, something hard and cold and unfeeling. But she had discovered the truth. Beneath the armor was a man who felt everything too deeply, who had learned to protect himself by pretending not to care. Love had not tamed him. Love had freed him to be fully human again. And Charlotte, who had spent 23 years being properly educated and perfectly behaved and utterly hollow, had learned that freedom was not rebellion. It was simply the courage to be honest about who you were and what you needed. On a grey December afternoon, Charlotte stood in the garden watching rain create patterns on the rose petals. Peter found her there, wrapping his arms around her from behind, his chin resting on her shoulder. "Happy?" he asked. "Completely. No regrets?" Charlotte turned in his arms, looking up at the face she loved more with each passing year. "Not a single one, even when society still whispers?" "Especially then." She smiled. "Let them whisper. We have something they will never understand. We have truth. We have each other. We have this." The rain fell softly around them as they stood together, 5 years married, and more in love than the day they had fled London. Inside, their children played. Beyond the garden, a community they had helped flourish went about its work. And in each other's arms, two people who had chosen love over comfort, freedom over cages, honesty over pretense, held tight to what they had built together. Not a fairy tale ending. Something better. A real life, fully lived, with all its complexity and challenge and extraordinary joy. The Duke of War had found his peace, and the Earl's daughter had found her wings. Together, they had found home. Charlotte's story reminds us that true love is not about perfection or convenience. It is about choosing courage over comfort, honesty over pretense, and freedom over gilded cages. She walked away from everything society told her she should want, and in doing so found everything her soul truly needed. Peter was never tamed by love, he was freed by it. Together they proved that the bravest act is not conforming to expectations, but daring to live authentically, even when the world calls you scandalous. Sometimes the life we are given is not the life we are meant to live. And sometimes, the greatest act of love is giving someone permission to be fully themselves. What cage are you still living in? What would you risk for a chance at real freedom? If this story touched your heart, I would be so grateful if you would leave a like. It helps more people discover these tales of courage and love. Please subscribe to the channel so you never miss a story, and I would love to know where in the world you are listening from. Drop a comment below with your location. Your support means everything and allows me to keep bringing you these stories. Thank you for being here, and until the next story, may you always choose freedom over fear.